I'm Shaun Haney, and this is RealAg on the Weekend. Let's get real and get connected with the week that was in Canadian agriculture. RealAg on the Weekend starts now. Welcome to RealAg on the Weekend here on 650 CKOM and 980 CJME. I'm your host, Shaun Haney of RealAgriculture.com. It is great to be with you here today. I hope you had yourself a great week. Of course, here on RealAg on the Weekend, we try to wrap up all things that happened during the week in Canadian agriculture, and we continue to hear great feedback from many of you that are really enjoying us talking agriculture on 650 and 980. It's really great, and keep that feedback coming. If you do want to provide us with feedback, you can definitely always send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also find us across all the different social media platforms. Real Agriculture is on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, as well as TikTok. And also, we have a RealAg feedback line. The neat part about this is, if you're a little bit shy, you don't want to be on the air, it's okay. It's really simple. I know everybody can leave a voicemail. All you have to do is go 855-776-6147. You press the number 3 when prompted, and then it allows you to leave me a message. And love getting your perspectives and insights on all things that are happening and how it's impacting your farm or ranch. And please give me that feedback. This is a two-way conversation indeed. Today on the show, we're going to have a lot of fun. We're going to talk a little bit about farm transition here in a little bit. We're also going to hear from Garner Deobold. He is the chair of the Saskatchewan Stock Growers Association. He is going to talk about their upcoming Saskatchewan Stock Growers Association AGM that's happening in Moose Jaw here in the first part of June, coming up very, very quickly. We're also going to talk about how do you find efficiency in a shop. I want to talk about that, as well as we're also going to hear a little bit from Anne Wasko, the Gateway Livestock Exchange, to talk a little bit about the beef markets and what's going on as well. Okay, I mentioned farm transition. And Keith, this is something that impacts farmers really across Saskatchewan, as well as across the entire country of Canada and the U.S. Well, really, quite frankly, is there a farm that isn't touched by the farm transition issue? Even if you don't have necessarily the next generation on the farm, you're still impacted by the topic, right? So this impacts everybody. And RealAgristudies, the market research arm of Real Agriculture, recently did a study on farm transition and really kind of tried to dive into the topic. There's a lot of people talking about farm transition right now. It's getting a lot of attention in the mainstream. I think some of the data is misinterpreted. For example, okay, if we acknowledge that there's a percentage of farms that currently do not have a succession plan for their farm, that doesn't mean that there isn't a next generation. In fact, we found that only 2% of our respondents across Canada said they basically will just end up selling. Like they have no succession plan. There's no next generation. There's no intention to carry forward in any sort of manner, and they're winding it down. Okay. Everybody else, it's like an active going concern. And so we talked to 588 farmers across Canada. They responded to our questions about farm transition. And when asked what the barriers were to a successful farm business transition, farmers told Real Agristudies the number one barrier, okay? And I'll give you just a little second here to think. What do you think would be the number one barrier to farm transition being a success? Well, what farmers said, you got your, and now I've given you time. You got your guess. Okay, it's tax implications. 43% said it was an extremely significant barrier. 32% said it was a somewhat significant barrier. Now, some of you may have said, well, it's communication. Everybody not on the same page. Lack of communication was the second largest barrier. Now, interestingly, if the older you are, the more concerned you are about the tax implications, while the younger you are means the more concerned about communication you are when it comes to farm transition. There's a difference in the generations there in terms of what's important to them. Older farmers thinking about the taxes, younger farmers thinking about the communication as the barrier. Overall, though, barrier to tax implications was notified or mentioned as the biggest barrier. Now, when it comes to overcoming those barriers, people turn sometimes to external resources. When we think about external resources, 64% of farmers are using an external advisor to help them through their transition. 64%. So there's quite a large number of farmers that are not, which I thought the number would be higher. I'll be honest. I thought that more people would be using an external advisor, but it is what it is. Now, keep in mind, tax complications is the largest barrier. 87% of farmers who are working with an external advisor are working with an accountant to assist in the transition. So either that's being done to deal with the largest barrier, or maybe I had somebody say to me, yeah, well, the reason that tax implications are the biggest barrier is because people are talking to their accountant too much. They're creating issues. Well, I actually don't know if that's true, but that was an interesting way to twist the answer. 72% said they were working with a lawyer. Okay. I had one farmer say to me that they're surprised those two aren't flipped. More people talking to a lawyer than their accountant versus accountant than lawyer. And so one thing that did surprise me in our study on this is only 11% of farmers say they were working with an insurance provider. Now, given what I would say is pretty common, people using life insurance to deal with off-farm siblings, right? So on-farm sibling, basically it's the opportunity to buy the farm or at a discount or maybe given the farm, whatever that looks like. And off-farm siblings, they get the life insurance. That's a common tactic that is used in family farm succession and transitions. Only 11% were using an insurance provider, which another example of where I found that kind of lower than I thought it would have been. Now, knowing that the lack of communication is the second largest barrier, and accountants and lawyers are by far the largest group used as advisors, there's some pressure and emphasis here for the accountants and the lawyers listening to this program to make sure that you're dealing with some of the communication issues, right? So it's easy to talk to make sure that the numbers make sense. That's a big part of it, of course, and some of the tax consequences. And making sure that the deal is papered properly, obviously also important when it comes to the lawyer. And the wills and all that kind of stuff. That's all good, but based on how important communication was, especially that younger generation, there's definitely some direction here for accountants and lawyers. Because once you get past accountants and lawyers, it really drops off. So pressure on that group who seem to be handling a majority of these family farm succession transitions to make sure they are up. They are up when it comes to the communication. Over-communicating. I think that's very loud and clear from this study. So if you want more information from this study that we did, you can just go to RealAgristudies.com. That's RealAgristudies.com. And I got the link to all the high-level results there, and you can check it out. And if you are interested in finding out more, you can reach out to me by email as well, shaney@RealAgriculture.com. Let's take a break. When we come back, we are going to hear from Garner Deobold from Saskatchewan Stock Growers. They got an annual meeting coming up. It's actually a really cool meeting. I've been to it many times. It's a lot of fun, very informative, and some great people as well from the ranching community in Saskatchewan. We'll hear all about it when we come back here on 650 CKOM and 980 CJME. You're listening to Real Ag on the Weekend.
Hi, I'm Lindsay Smith of RealAgriculture.com. Join me Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern for The Agronomists, Canada's only live, interactive, agronomy-based show. Each week, we answer your most pressing questions with a rotating panel of agronomists, researchers, and extension staff from across Canada. Join me Monday nights, 8 p.m. Eastern on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, or LinkedIn, or head to realagriculture.com/live at 8 p.m. Eastern.
If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today.
And welcome back to Real Ag on the weekend. Well, coming up here quickly, it's fast. It's amazing how fast this year is gone. But June 4th through the 6th in Moose Jaw, we are going to have the 110th anniversary AGM of the Saskatchewan Stock Growers Association. Crazy, 110. I was going to do this research and I haven't. I actually wonder if that's one of the longest standing association, like consecutive in Canada. Like, what other organizations been 110 times? Maybe there is one, but I don't see it. That is absolutely amazing. Here to talk about this year's AGM coming up for the Saskatchewan Stock Growers Association is Garner Deobold. He is chair of the Saskatchewan Stock Growers Association. Garner, great to have you.
Well, thank you very much, Shaun. Great to be here.
Yeah, so 110 years. Congratulations. That's a feat in itself.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it is quite a milestone, and you're right. I mean, it is probably, if not the longest standing producer group, that is organized, and so we are, very fortunate. I guess it's been a very strong organization over the years and continues to do so. So, we like to represent the livestock industry and advocate for them. And, we continue to do good work in that area.
So what are some of the big issues that will be discussed at this year's meeting, Garner?
There's a number of things. I guess it's an opportunity to get together. We've got an agenda that's packed full of some excellent speakers that will be presenting on a number of different topics. A couple of the highlights, I guess, Dr. Tammy Nemeth is going to speak, give us a presentation there on some of the things that are changing as far as the environmental, social, governance standards, all things that affect us, I guess, but we really have no control over, and just she'll lay it out and what it means for livestock producers. So I think everybody would find that very interesting, and it's something to be aware of, and probably we can get some good ideas of how to deal with some of those things along the way as well. Another presentation from Dr. Melanie Morrison from the Better Cart Analytics will be there. She's going to talk about some of her research on looking at retail beef pricing and the spread between the ranch and retail price. So those are things I think that we've had. There's always been a lot of attention to that over the last couple of years, and we know that retailers are charging a considerable amount for beef, and consumers were really thankful for their support and continue to buy beef. But there is a real spread there, and so she drills down and looks at what that spread actually is and what it means. So that will be interesting. Our Sask Minister of Agriculture, the Honourable Dave Merritt, will be there as well to speak to us, and so it's always good to get an update from the government and see what they're up to. And so those are three speakers on the first day, I guess, that are going to be very interesting. Brenna Grant from CanFac, the executive director, will be there giving us a beef cattle market outlook. So that will be another highlight of the day. So we've got other speakers in on the Tuesday. Jason Pollock there, the CEO of Livestock Services of Saskatchewan, will be speaking. So I think it will be a big conference, big convention, a nice trade show with it, and we'd sure encourage any and all producers and any of the industry stakeholders to come join us in Moose Jaw. There's other things that we will definitely be dealing with. One of them, I think one of the hot topics of the day is the changes coming from CFIA on traceability and what that means for all of us as livestock producers. And, those are things that we need to sit down, and the comment period closes here mid-June. And so I think there's going to be there definitely are some changes that are coming that are going to impact all of us. this is our opportunity to put our heads together and come up with some good comments, I guess, constructive comments and things that we need to get back to CFIA before the deadline closes.
Yeah, great stuff. Full agenda, definitely. I've been to the Saskatchewan Stock Growers AGM a number of times. I've been able to MC it over a handful. And, one of the things when I first started going to that meeting that really grabbed a hold of me, or I really noticed, is, a lot of times we talk about how, the farmer, the livestock producer are the original environmentalists. And I've always felt, Garner, that, when I go to the stock growers meeting, there's always a lot of discussion about wildlife and, making sure that, everybody can work on that land, take care of the grassland as the rancher, but also it's the home and it's occupied by an entire ecosystem. And so I've always been amazed by that. That's always stuck with me when I go to that stock growers meeting.
Well, and you're right. I mean, that is something that we spend a lot of time on, and it's something that we've always work towards. And you're right. I mean, the rancher farmer, they are here to look after the land and are good stewards of the land. And so I think that, the message coming down now, from government and the people that set the rules and regulations, I think they have learned a lot from ranchers and farmers, and they will continue to do so. And so we're there to work with them, and that will also be part of the discussion at the AGM, and our foundation now as well is very active, and it's something that we had founded here 3 or 4 years ago, and so that's something that we will also have their AGM during ours, and so there again, it gives an opportunity to get some feedback from the grassroots producers and just to give us more direction and continue to work with a lot of the programming that's out there now. Yeah.
So from your perspective, in your ranch, how's grass looking?
Well, we have had a reasonably good start to the spring. We had better snow cover. It came early. It was a long winter this year, and I'm telling you, there it got to be a bit of a drag. But because of that, we had decent runoff in most areas. So the water situation is better. Grass had a decent start, and again, there was such a deficit that it's going to take some time to catch up again. But now there's been some spotty rain in areas. There is a bit of moisture out there, and conditions are better. But again, we're like we always say here, we're a week away from a drought, and there's still some areas that we can't forget about that weren't as fortunate, I guess, and are short. But overall, I think in general we are in a better position than we have been over the last 3 or 4 years for sure.
Yeah, we've been bought some time. Right? But not a lot. Correct. So if Mother Nature's listening here, we appreciate it. But I think there's a lot of acres across Saskatchewan that, are in better shape, like you said, but we can't turn the tap off because we don't have that reserve, right? We're not fortunate enough to have that reserve to hold us through an extended dry period. So we're going to have to rebuild that.
You're right, exactly. I mean, right now there is a bit of moisture, but it's only in the top foot, in some areas down to maybe 2 feet, but below that it's powder dry yet. And so if you all of a sudden turn the heat up and put a little wind to it, that will evaporate and draw the moisture out of there so quick that, we're right back to where we were here a year or two ago.
And Garner, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Shaun. And I just invite everybody to come out to the conference. It's going to be a great one, and thanks for the interest, Shaun.
If you are interested in going to the Saskatchewan Stock Growers Annual General Meeting, make sure you go to skstockgrowers.com to get more information. We'll be right back on RealAg on the weekend here on 650 CKOM and 980 CJME.
The next generation is the future of agriculture, but how do we launch from one role to leading? From succession planning and family dynamics to understanding finances and making the tough calls to discovering paths others have taken all through agriculture, the Successors Podcast covers it all. Tune in with me, your host, Kara Oosterhuis, simply by searching The Successors on your favorite podcast platform, or you can find it by visiting www.realagriculture.com.
Canola is more than just a pretty face in the prairie landscape. It's a big business, both here and around the world, that requires you to be informed and up to date on everything it takes to grow a successful crop. The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com has an expert library of video resources covering markets, agronomy, and more to help you grow a healthy and profitable canola crop. Visit canolaschool.com today. Brought to you by BASF Canada and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
Whether you're seeding, harvesting, or anything in between, the Wheat School on RealAgriculture.com has you covered. Timely agronomic information from industry experts available online anytime. Give your wheat crop a good start and a great finish with the Wheat School on RealAgriculture.com. Brought to you by C&M Seeds, Syngenta Canada, and the Alberta Wheat and Barley Commission.
Welcome back to Real Ag on the Weekend. I'm your host, Shaun Haney of RealAgriculture.com. Now, every 2 weeks since, 2010, I have had the total honor to be able to talk to Anne Wasko, the Gateway Livestock Exchange, also ranches in East End, Saskatchewan, which thankfully is getting some moisture. Things are looking a little green. East End not used to green grass. It's been a little slow on the moisture front the past few years, so that's good to see. So every 2 weeks, Anne and I do a beef market update, and it's always great to get her insight and her analysis on what's happening in these cattle markets, because there's a lot of variables. There's a lot of stuff. When we talk about the Canadian market, the U.S. market, we got to try to decipher all of this. So this week's edition, and if you want to listen to the entire episode, just go to realagriculture.com. But I want to play a little clip for you of Anne and I talking about this week's big news on the beef trade front, which is basically Taiwan has said that Canada now has unrestricted access to the Taiwanese market when it comes to beef products. And we saw the Minister of Trade, Mary Ng, tweet out that I believe it was on Thursday. Kind of no government press release, no statement, just nothing. It was just kind of a tweet. I guess that's how we do things here in 2023. Here's Anne and I talking about the announcement. Canada now has unrestricted access to the Taiwanese market. This is a big deal.
Well, sure it is. Anytime full access to a market that we trade with occurs. I know it's been we talked a lot about the anniversary, the 20-year anniversary of BSE, but these are good wins for the industry. We know I talked to in our interview last week about market diversification for trade. So this is another piece of that. So that was announced this week, and Taiwan and Canada have kind of a long on again, off again beef trade relationship. Going back to the full closure back in 2003 with the first BSE case, then a reopening to UTM in 2007, then closed again in 2015 when there was another case, or one of the cases, and then opened again in 2016 to UTM and some offals. So this is, like I say, on again, off again. But I understand full access, likely within a couple of weeks, we should be seeing some beef potentially moving, which is wonderful. The Eastern Asian markets are hugely important, whether we're talking about, Japan or South Korea or Vietnam, and now we can add Taiwan to that list. That's huge for Canadian beef. It's a strong market for us, and this is only good news for sure.
Yeah. You think about it, 20 years to get back to normal. That's wow.
Yeah. Long time.
Now, here's one thing that I've been looking at this week. So Canada has an atypical case of BSE. Was it last December? Mm-hmm. No, it'd be over a year ago.
A year.
Yeah. We're like a year and a half. What am I talking about? A year and a half ago.
Yeah.
The U.S. had an atypical case last week. Different reactions from trading partners to an atypical case of BSE. Canada definitely seems getting the worse end of the stick from some partners. Fair?
Yeah, I think it's fair. And one of the key differences between our two countries is just, how dependent Canada is on trade. And so it does become a real issue when you start to get these hiccups and challenges along the way. So, it's not the same. I guess that's as simple as a way to put it. Yeah.
Well, it didn't see China delisting U.S. packing plants.
No. Right? And my understanding, Shaun, and maybe a chat with CCA would be up for this, but I understand that part is still crickets in terms of beef movement to China. Yeah,
from a Canadian perspective, we heard from the Canadian Pork Council that those plants in the pork sector have been relisted. So Canada is now shipping pork to China again. They said when we talked to them last week. Interesting enough, Anne, a lot of discussions right now about some of the struggles of the pork business. And I know we're here to talk about the beef markets, but what's happening in the cattle sector right now for producers is different than what's happening to producers. Like we talked to Rabobank this week, $50 US losses for producers right now per head. That's substantial. So what's the difference?
Well, I think it goes back, and I think you've talked about this in your interview, talked about it as well this week, the supply, right? So U.S. beef production so far this year is down 5%. So is Canada's. So this is that supply story. And at the same time, you've got U.S. pork production up from last year. So lots of supply. It appears like there's lots of supply for some time, as I understand, and a little bit struggling on the export front for U.S. pork export. So all of those things have meant more pork staying in the U.S. and certainly helping to weigh on that market.
That was Anne Wasko with Gateway Livestock Exchange, breaking down some of the big news that we had this week in terms of Taiwan opening up unrestricted access for Canada to get meat exports, or beef exports, I should say, into the country. What's interesting, Anne and I left in the audio there where we were talking about, the fact the U.S. had an atypical case of BSE last Friday, actually, and no trade ramifications with partners. Now, what I'm told after Anne and I had the discussion, my understanding is when I talked to Jim Wiesmeyer, pro farmer out of D.C., is that when it comes to China, this is the phase one deal. Remember that the Trump administration had negotiated that phase one deal? Well, situations like this are addressed in that phase one deal, which really, I guess, keeps the beef moving, so to speak, where they don't close the border based on something like an atypical case. It's something I'm going to follow up on and sort of chase. Mind you, even though Canada's border to that atypical case is still basically closed or China's border, I should say, because of that atypical case 2 Decembers ago, there was other countries as well that also said no thank you but those situations were rectified. I believe that China is the only one that is still left. I think at play here, it always, when we're talking about China, it comes down to the not science at all, not phytosanitary, as we dealt with some of those issues when it came to canola going into China or not going into canola. It all comes down to they need it. And I think my guess is, or my assumption, my perception is that China right now needs U.S. beef. And so, no, not going to cut it off. And we're also this is also the difference between the U.S. has a lot more leverage, a lot more. When you're the largest economy in the world, you have a lot more leverage when it comes to something like this. Not to say the U.S. doesn't have trade issues and non-tariff barriers with countries, but Canada has a much tougher fight, a much more of an uphill climb at times when we're dealing with non-tariff trade barriers because our economy is different, a different scale and size than the U.S. So, that's my perception. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But it's interesting to see how Canada's experience with this atypical case of BSE is much different than what the U.S. has gone through the past week, or what they haven't gone through in the past week. Let's take a break. We'll be right back here on RealAg on the Weekend, broadcasting on 650 CKOM and 980 CJME.
Want to get the best out of your soybean crops? Whether you've been growing them for a generation or are just starting into soybeans, find what you need to know at soybeanschool.com. You'll see videos on growing tips, pest control, and much more from specialists across the region, all in one place. Easy for you to access from your desktop, tablet, or mobile phone. Maximize your yields by staying up to date with the Soybean School, presented by BASF, Pride Seeds, and Syngenta Canada.
Before you get back in the field this year, spend some time with the Corn School on RealAgriculture.com. Get all the information you need on hybrid selection, planting depth, crop inputs, and more from a wide range of industry experts. A massive library of video content is available on demand when you need it most. Spend your time outside of the field, inside the classroom, with the Corn School on RealAgriculture.com.
Welcome back to RealAg on the Weekend. Here, what a crazy week. This was not a slow news week whatsoever at all, which always keeps me hopping and busy and trying to keep up to speed on all things agriculture. This is a fun job, right? As the founder of RealAgriculture.com, I get to really talk to a lot of very interesting people that have great stories to tell. You get to dive into the impacts on certain issues and talk to stakeholders and put the puzzle together. We do a lot of agronomic information and coverage on RealAgriculture.com and our Real Agriculture YouTube channel. And all of that is great. And and also travel, right? I really get to see agriculture from coast to coast. And very few people get to do that. I say that in my speeches all the time. Some people get to focus on Saskatchewan, so to speak, or they're a dairy expert, or they focus on a certain region. Like I said, just focusing on one province like Saskatchewan. Very few people get to actually see it from the Maritimes to British Columbia, everywhere in between, and across all those different verticals. And I feel very, very lucky and fortunate. So there's the serious side of this job and making sure that you're up to date on the issues that impact your farm business. But there's also some fun stuff too, right? There is some fun stuff too. And a good example of that is we're launching a new video series. Okay, it's called RealAg Shops. And this is pretty cool. So it's sponsored by Princess Auto. Okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to feature really cool shops. Now, and just imagine this it's kind of like, and I've always wanted to do this. This is like one of those fun projects. And the fact that Princess Auto has stepped up and said that they're going to sponsor this show is really, really cool. So what we're going to do is, in a kind of MTV Cribs, remember that show? Like where they would find a celebrity, go to their house, and like Snoop Dogg would tour you, or like Garth Brooks would tour you through their house. And in some cases it was like, oh, that's kind of modest. In other cases, like, wow, that's how the rich and famous live. But it was kind of cool to see sort of their own personal side to likely one of their homes, but their main residence or their house in a city. We're going to do this with shops. Okay. So here's the thing. I need suggestions. And here's the best part. Okay. So when I say we're going to feature some shops, of course, we are going to have some episodes where it's like the mega shop. It's the person that's built this Boeing factory size shop that's got wash bays and all the bells and whistles. It may have been like, I know a guy that put a pub in the loft, the second floor, so they can have like parties in the shop. Some people have living quarters. Like Some people go way there's going to that next step and, really, really put it to the edge in terms of innovation and development, doing some really cool stuff and not being scared to spend some money on a shop, right? Where the shop is maybe part like man cave, right? So that kind of thing. But we'll have those. Those are cool and those are fun. But we're also going to do some stuff where I want to focus on some retro stuff too. Or somebody has a really, really nice functional shop where they've done some interesting stuff to make themselves more productive and more efficient and really got the return. Because here's the thing. A shop, if you are mechanically inclined and you can do a lot of this work yourself, instead of sending it out to maybe the local mechanic or having to take it back to the dealership, you can get a return on it. And in researching this new series, I've heard that from a lot of farmers, right? That, before we used to work on our equipment outside, we had to wait for spring to get warm, and we always felt like we were behind when we got to planting season, and there was wasted months when it was snowing and stuff. Like, if you're in Arizona, that outdoor shop is fine, right? Doesn't snow. Now, if you're in Moose Jaw, different story altogether. So I continue to hear this from farmers. And the other part of this is like, I remember my grandpa's shop. He had like one of those 70s, I say 70s era, maybe it's earlier, where it was that Quonset, right? Where it had the curved sort of shaped roof to it. And at the time they were like, wow. Now we're like, you basically have one lane to drive stuff in. So you could store trucks or something on the sides of it. And you would try to squeeze and angle as much stuff as possible into that Quonset, right? It's just jam-packed because the roof on the edges got so low, and you would work on something kind of in the middle and you'd pull it out. Like now you look at some of these shops, they got like 4 doors and some of them are aircraft hangar doors, like just crazy. But I'm just as interested in that kind of stuff. Or, somebody's bought an old building and they've converted it into a shop. That's pretty cool. Or maybe it's an old dairy barn that's now become the shop. There's lots of different options. There's lots of different permutations and combinations when it comes to this topic. But I need suggestions. So listen, here's what you can do. If you have a neighbor, you have a friend, you have a family member that you think would be a shop that will qualify for this, I want to hear from you. If you have a shop that you are very proud of, and like I said, it doesn't need to be a super shop. It can be, but it doesn't need to be one of these mega shops. It could just be something simple. And we're gonna cover it and feature it in a very fun manner. And it's brought to you by and sponsored by Princess Auto. So please reach out to me. My email address is shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also find us across all the different social media platforms. And you can tell on your neighbor, hey, so my neighbor, Harry, has a very nice shop. You should talk to her. But I'm okay. You can tell. In this case, you can tell on your neighbor. You can report them. Absolutely. So would love to hear your feedback on the farm transition that we talked about earlier here on the show. And encourage you to go to RealAgristudies.com. There's a lot of information in that study at the high level, looking across Canada and looking at some of the challenges that some of the barriers, but there's opportunity as well in terms of farm succession, because I think this is one of the big threats to our industry is not doing farm succession as well as we possibly can. We have a lot of farm succession deals in this country that are not written down. That I think is a little bit of a concern as well. We got some of that data that's in that study. So go to RealAgristudies.com and send me your feedback on farm transition. What do you think goes right? What do you think goes wrong? And all the things in between. Would love to hear from you. I want to wish everybody a great rest of your weekend. Enjoy yourselves and keep that feedback coming. It is great to be on the air here in Saskatchewan. Thanks so much for getting real and getting connected with Real Ag on the weekend. Make sure you check out realagriculture.com, and we'll talk to you again next week. Cheers, everybody.